Okay, so the situation in Gaza seems to be really at a boiling point right now.
It really does.
We're seeing this major new Israeli military operation kicking off, even while there are reports of new efforts to get a ceasefire going.
Yeah, it's a very tense moment.
So for this deep dive, we're going to try and make sense of it. We're looking at the latest reports from the BBC, specifically from Saturday and Sunday. That's May 17th and 18th, 2025.
And also Al Jazeera's live updates from Sunday the 18th.
Right. And the goal here is, well, to understand this is critical point. Why this big military push while talks are apparently happening.
It's a really complex picture, and that timing, like you said, is what immediately jumps out.
How so?
Well, you have this large-scale Israeli operation. They're calling it Operation Gideon's Chariots.
Okay.
Launching essentially just as mediators, Qatar and the U.S. were reportedly sitting down in Doha with Hamas to talk about a truce, maybe release some hostages.
Wow. So intense fighting and diplomacy happening at the exact same time.
Exactly. That's the core tension we really need to dig into here.
Okay, let's zero in on Operation Gideon's Chariots then. The BBC is calling it the deadliest waves of strikes they've seen in months.
And Al Jazeera's reporting is incredibly stark, too. They reported at least 125 Palestinians killed just since dawn on Sunday.
Since dawn Sunday alone?
Yeah. And that figure, they say, includes 36 people killed in the Amawasi area.
Which has been described as a safe zone, right?
Yeah.
That's deeply worrying.
It is. Very worrying. And it speaks to the scale. The BBC mentioned at least 300 killed overall since Thursday.
In hospitals, refugee camps.
Yeah.
The reports are grim.
Absolutely. And the BBC also described this as the largest ground assault on northern Gaza since the offensive there restarted back in March. It suggests something pretty significant is underway.
And we have the Israeli military's stated objective. The BBC quotes the IDF saying, look, this continues until Hamas is no longer a threat and all the hostages are back home.
Right. They also mentioned striking over 150 targets, terror targets they called them, in just the preceding 24 hours.
But the areas being hit seem really widespread. Northern Gaza, Beit Lahia, Jabalia camp, then central Gaza, Deir al-Balah, southern Gaza, Khan Yunis, and now al-Mawasi. How does that square with the idea of specific targets?
Well, that's a key question, isn't it? While the stated aim is dismantling Hamas, the sheer geographical spread, as you point out, does raise questions.
Yeah.
And the BBC also highlighted significant troop movements. Thousands of troops, soldiers, reservists, potentially going into Gaza, tanks seen near the border.
So this sounds bigger than just targeted strikes.
It implies a much larger operation, perhaps aimed at applying pressure across a very wide area, not just isolated points.
And adding to this whole desperate situation, the BBC is reporting new evacuation orders. People in northern and central Gaza being told to leave their homes or shelters again.
Again. And aid workers are saying it's just nearly impossible. People have been displaced so many times already.
Where can they even go?
Exactly. It just highlights the humanitarian catastrophe that's unfolding, the feasibility, the human cost of these orders in such a devastated, crowded place. It's immense.
Okay, let's switch gears slightly, though. It's all connected. The ceasefire talks that reportedly started Saturday in Doha.
Right. Mediated by Qatar and the U.S.
The BBC had a report, quoting a Palestinian official, saying Hamas put forward a proposal, released 9 hostages
Okay.
in exchange for a 60-day truce, and Israel releasing some Palestinian prisoners.
And what's also interesting in that BBC report is that the Hamas proposal apparently includes other elements, too.
Like what?
Like getting 400 aid trucks in per day, a significant increase, and also allowing medical patients to be evacuated from Gaza.
So directly addressing the humanitarian crisis is part of the deal.
It seems so, yeah. Linking hostage release with some tangible relief for people in Gaza. That seems to be part of their angle, according to that report.
But then you have Israel's position. The BBC reported before these talks that Israel's public stance was pretty firm.
What was that?
No withdrawing troops from Gaza and no commitment to actually ending the war as part of this deal.
Ah, okay.
And they're also demanding proof of life for all the remaining hostages, plus detailed information about them.
Right. So you can immediately see the gaps. The Hamas proposal, at least as reported by the BBC, doesn't seem to include those Israeli demands about troops staying or a definitive end to the war.
feels like a significant hurdle for the mediators.
Absolutely. It highlights just how far apart the sides might be and the challenge facing Qatar and the U.S.
Which inevitably brings us back to the humanitarian situation inside Gaza. Aid agencies, the BBC says, are reporting it's worsened considerably.
Yeah, especially with Israel reportedly blocking supplies for something like 10 weeks now.
And we heard from that Gazan journalist, just heartbreaking. His family down to one meal a day, food scarce, costs spiraling.
And accusing Israel of using food as a weapon. That's a very strong statement.
How critical is the food situation overall?
It sounds incredibly critical, deeply alarming. You have these warnings from aid agencies about the real risk of famine for Gaza's, 2.1 million people?
Yeah.
And there are reports, even footage apparently, of children suffering severe malnutrition, looking emaciated. It's catastrophic.
And the BBC noted U.S. President Trump saying a lot of people were starving.
Which contrasts, it's important to say, with the Israeli government's position. They've repeatedly rejected claims of a widespread food shortage. So you have these very different perspectives being reported.
The personal stories that really hit home, though. That British surgeon at Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis.
Yeah, what did he describe?
Exhausted staff who've lost weight themselves, very thin children with terrible burn injuries. He said they're more prone to infection, have less capacity to heal.
Oh, awful.
And even youngsters losing their teeth, likely from malnutrition. Just harrowing details.
It really underscores the immense strain, not just on the healthcare system, but on the basic physical well-being of the population, especially children. The long-term effects. It's hard to fathom.
Unsurprisingly, the international community is reacting strongly to this latest offensive.
You'd expect them to.
The BBC notes condemnation from the UN, several European leaders. The head of UNRWA, Philippe Lazzarini, expressed shock.
What did he say?
He questioned how many more Palestinian lives will be wiped out and said, and this is a direct quote, "Atrocities are becoming a new norm."
Wow. That's a powerful statement from a UN official.
It is. And you also have figures like the UN Secretary General Guterres, Spain's Prime Minister Sanchez, Italy's Foreign Minister Tajani, all calling for a permanent ceasefire, according to the BBC.
Right. And Germany's foreign ministry warned the offensive risks making the humanitarian situation even worse and could endanger the remaining hostages. So widespread alarm.
And just to remind ourselves of the broader context here, Israel's stated aim, as the BBC notes, is still destroying Hamas. This is all in response to the October 7th attacks.
Right, where about 1,200 Israelis were killed and 251 taken hostage.
And tragically, 58 hostages are still being held by Hamas.
And on the other side, the death toll in Gaza, the Hamas-run health ministry figure reported by the BBC is at least 53,000 people killed since the conflict began.
53,000. And over 3,000 of those just since March.
The human cost is just staggering. And it's also worth remembering, the BBC reported Prime Minister Netanyahu's earlier statements
About a major escalation.
Yeah, promising a major military escalation to occupy parts of Gaza, push the population south, and, quote, destroy Hamas. He'd even mentioned back on May 5th that an intense entry into Gaza was being prepared.
So this current operation seems to fit that pattern.
The timing certainly seems consistent with those earlier indications, yeah.
So where does this leave us? We've got this major new military push, these simultaneous, maybe fragile ceasefire talks, and this backdrop of just utter humanitarian crisis.
It really feels like a critical juncture. You have these powerful forces pulling in different directions. It's incredibly volatile, very unpredictable.
No easy answers in sight.
Definitely not. The interplay between the military pressure and the diplomatic efforts is going to be crucial in the coming days and weeks.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something to think about. Will this intense new offensive, Operation Gideon's Chariots, and the strong international condemnation it's getting, will it ultimately wreck the chances for a ceasefire and getting those hostages home?
Or could it, maybe counterintuitively, create so much pressure, so much urgency, that it actually forces some kind of breakthrough at the negotiating table?
That's the question, isn't it? And meanwhile, as the humanitarian catastrophe deepens, what are the long-term scars going to be for everyone involved, for the whole region, regardless of how these next few weeks play out?
Huge questions with consequences that will likely last for generations.